Hello, Judy. It is wonderful to have you here today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
You're so accomplished. You have such an amazing backstory, which I can't wait to get into from Wall Street to Iron Chef to restaurateur, head chef, really breaking all kinds of boundaries. But in your private life, you yourself were struggling with endometriosis. I myself have endometriosis, 1 in 10, probably more actually, in the United States, born with a uterus, struggle with endometriosis. So thank you for bravely sharing your story.
Thank you. Yeah, I do think it's more than 1 in 10 because I believe that so many people out there, so many women out there are just not being diagnosed. They just think that they have very painful periods, and you really can't diagnose this unless you see it. So it's hard to diagnose from just a normal pap smear or routine gynecological exam.
So accurate. And I know for myself, I was 11 years old when I got my first period, and I didn't know clearly what a period was supposed to be like or feel like, or what was normal or abnormal.
Mhm.
Um, and for you, did you have an early onset of symptoms or struggles with your menstrual cycle?
I did, and I had always had um, fibroids, so it was hard for my doctors to distinguish what was actually pain from my fibroids and what was pain from endometriosis. And so when you have two of those things going on at the same time, the fibroids obviously cause very heavy periods, very, very painful periods also. And when I was getting one of my fibroids removed, that was kind of when my first doctor said, actually, and by the way, you have endometriosis also, because he saw it. So I had always just been diagnosed as having fibroids. I had no idea what endometriosis was until I was having a surgery to remove some of those fibroids. And he's like, oh, there it is. Yeah.
Did you feel when you got that diagnosis, were you aware of what endometriosis even was, or did you have to look into it?
Oh, I absolutely looked into it. I had no idea. I just thought that it would just give me very painful periods. I had no idea that this thing could like spread and fuse all your organs together and everything. And my doctor in the UK didn't really know that much about it either, actually. And I was just kind of living a relatively normal life. I have to say, I was very lucky and rather asymptomatic, although I did have very painful periods. But it was nothing that, like a few Advils wouldn't, solve for me. I never stayed home from work. I was never immobile. So I was just, my doctors always say I have a high threshold for pain, but I mean, like I could feel pain, but I guess I'm so driven that I was just like, I just have to get on with my day, but I did the whole thing of like, having to make sure that like I changed my pad and my tampon like every 45 minutes because I would just like bleed through to like chairs and everything. I was constantly anemic and, I was just, I mean, it was like a murder scene practically if I didn't like, keep on top of it and stuff, just like, I was like, I am dying. Like there's so much blood coming out of me.
Mhm.
But,
Yeah.
you
It,
know, yeah.
and I think it's interesting because I look back at my childhood and being in middle school and high school and having the same experience. I remember very vividly of bleeding through and getting up to go to the restroom. And this really sweet girl behind me is like, whoa, sit down. And she gave me her windbreaker to tie around my waist to go to the nurse's office. And it was like a normal thing to go to the nurse's office and have to have your mom pick you up to let you go home to shower, to change your clothes. And never once was the nurse like, this is kind of weird, like this might be a
Exactly.
little too much. Um, I know I never heard the term for all of my gynecologist visits as a teenager on endometriosis until I was 32. So, in so many ways, as unfortunate as it is to have the diagnosis of endometriosis and fibroids, the dual diagnosis, what age were you when you finally got the endo diagnosis?
Oh, I was probably around 40 or like 38, 40 years old. Yeah, I had no idea. And and I'm very proactive with my healthcare. It was just always, oh, you have fibroids, you have fibroids. And my mother had fibroids. So I just kind of accepted that. Um, had no idea. And it was really my gynecologist in the UK didn't really have much knowledge about it, like I said before. And he was just like, okay, well, it's fine, if you're not in too much pain, and you can just take some anti-inflammatories and live with it. And it was really my CA-125 levels that shot through the roof that drove me to surgery. So I didn't even know, but he had been, giving me blood tests and looking at my CA-125s. And, lo and behold, like one time I did my tests and they were like in the 500s or something, and they're supposed to be under 35, And so he's like, you need to deal with this endometriosis because it's going to lead to cancer. And he is one of the best gynecologists in the UK. And he was like, we can't deal with this here in the UK. It's like, if you've got insurance in the United States, go to the United States.
Wow.
And they were just like, yeah, we don't know what it is. We don't deal with it. Like, we can't have, we're starting to, but he's like, just go to America. Like, they'll deal with you much better. And so that's how I found Dr. Sachkin. Yeah.
That's interesting too, that the CA-125 was indicative of endometriosis, because like you said, that's usually a test to see if you have any sort of cancer cells, or right
Yeah.
precancer, for those that don't know. So to know that those can correlate is interesting for anyone out there who might be able to get a simple lab test if they think there's something going on.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it stands for cancer antigen. That's why it's called the CA-125. So it is kind of a scary thing. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have cancer. It is just an indication of that cancer is possibly reoccurring, or it's come back, or it'll lead to it potentially. It doesn't mean that you have cancer. It's just one of the tests they use to monitor. So my CA-125s were like through the roof. And I was a little bit kind of disappointed that I didn't know more about endometriosis before, because if I had done something about it 5 years prior to when I first learned I had it, I probably wouldn't have been in such a bad state when I finally did get my surgery 5 years later, because it's just grows inside of you, like it gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And, I had stage 5, I think, at like frozen pelvis, like the worst, absolutely worst form in case of endometriosis. But, Dr. Sechkin and my doctors in New York were really surprised by my MRI and matching it up to me as a person and the lifestyle that I live, because I was really active, like I remember like the week before I saw Dr. Sachkin, I was like hiking and, like sailing and all these things that I lived a very, very active life. I was exercising a ton. And he's like, usually people who have this type of MRI cannot move. They are, paralyzed in pain. And, and then I was on the table for a regular gynecological exam, and he was examining me. He's like, you have no pain with this? I'm like, no, I'm fine. And he's like, usually women who have your type of MRI scan can't even
Jump
get
off
to
the
the
table.
gynecological. Yeah, they'll
Yeah.
jump off the table. Like they just can't handle it. And so like they actually even called my doctors in London because they didn't believe me. Like they're like, well, is she really doing all these things? Is she really going to work every day? Is she really, working out, this active, skiing, hiking, like scuba diving, all this stuff, like you name it. I'm doing it. And
I wonder if it was, high pain thresholds, and also like were the nerve endings not involved. I mean, it's just so interesting how each person
yeah,
suffers differently, right?
it's different. I mean, yeah, I think everybody's biology is different. I mean, I definitely feel pain. Like I'm not like one of these like
So
people. But what I have to say is I really think it's because I naturally eat an anti-inflammatory diet all the time. Like these are just the foods that I gravitate towards, and I don't drink a lot at all, like, of course, I enjoy a drink every now and then, but I don't drink daily at all. I don't eat a lot of sugar, and I never really eat processed foods, so being a chef, I'm cooking a lot of fresh foods. I'm making, I love vegetables just like naturally, like, and I don't eat a lot of red meat just naturally. I just don't gravitate towards it. I'd much rather have fish. I'm such a big fish eater and sushi eater and all these things. And so I really attribute it to not having as many flare-ups as I did to the type of diet that I'm still on today. It's just a way of eating. I don't even want to call it a diet, you know?
Yeah, no, I think it's important. I remember the first thing that I heard about when I was Googling endo upon being diagnosed. Like one of the first things was endometriosis anti-inflammatory diet. And I was like, what is this? And I was completely opposite as you. I was eating fast food. I was in media, I'm in media. So I hosted a radio show and I did TV, and it was always like eating out of a vending machine. It was disgusting.
Oh gosh,
Or
yeah.
like eating out food from the fast food in, Rockefeller, like
Mhm.
concourse. It's gross when I look back,
Yeah.
and I think, of course, I had swollen joints and everything going on because I was eating quickly. I wasn't sitting down. I wasn't really planning accordingly. But I know with myself, endo and diet has a lot to do with how I feel. Like I just ate poorly a couple days ago. I'm all swollen in the knuckles. I'm bloated. It's not good. I know my body really doesn't do well. And so many people ascribe to anti-inflammatory diet. For you, it's always been your normal routine, or was it something that you kind of figured out that your body was best operating when you ingested those kinds of foods, the
I
good
mean,
kinds of
I think it's something that I kind of grew into because, of course, in college, I was just like eating pizza and like
foods?
instant ramen noodles all the time. But I didn't really have, I don't think I had an endometriosis back then. And plus, when you're in your 20s, I think you can kind of just eat everything and it doesn't really matter.
Mhm.
But as I grew older and I don't know, it's just like my taste buds just changed. I cannot stand the taste of like fake ice cream, like fake vanilla ice cream, like anything chemically. I'm just like, oh my God, gross. Like anything with that fake butter, I'm just like gross. I just can't handle it. I can taste the chemicals, I can taste the preservatives, all of that stuff. And so I feel that just eating fresh over time, I just prefer it so much more. Um, and I love vegetables. I love green leafy vegetables. And don't get me wrong, like occasionally, like I love potato chips or something, so it's all about balance. But I think that I just kind of grew into it, but also just being a chef and knowing about food and educating myself about food, I began to see how much is in our food that we don't need, particularly, once you start cooking and you work in restaurants, you just see how much butter, restaurants use and how much like fat and like, salt and cheese and whatever goes into things, and it just makes you think twice about wanting to put that into your body. Yeah.
For someone who might have been more like me and had
Yes.
endometriosis or an inflammatory illness, who's wanting to be more like you in terms of diet, how do they look at their kitchen and go, okay, what do I need as the starter pack here? What can I do at home that's easy to transition to a healthier lifestyle?
Well, I think you got to start small, just like little wins, because I think I don't believe in elimination diets
Okay.
first of all. I think that you need fats, you need carbs, you need the good kind of carbs, the good kind of fats, so like you shouldn't just cut out entire food groups. I just think that that's unhealthy and ultimately just not sustainable in terms of a lifestyle, but one thing that you can do that I think is very easy is take out empty calories, so don't drink soda. If you're a soda drinker, that can of Coke or Pepsi or something, even like these artificial sweeteners, be very cautious of them because a lot of these are not good for you, like the equals, the stevias of the world, like the new information is coming out all the time and they actually make you crave sweet things over time. You develop a sweet tooth and you want to eat sweet things more and more. They become addictive. You become addicted to wanting to have something sweet in your mouth. And so things like sodas, things that like white foods a lot, not all white foods, but like white rice, white bread, white pasta, things that don't really provide any type of nutritional value, just stay away from. If you're eating, think of everything that you put in your mouth as going towards making yourself feel better and give yourself fuel. Food is medicine and food is energy. It makes you think better. It gives you energy. It makes you, get through the day, everything. So you don't want to just give yourself empty things. You want to make sure that there are nutrients behind it. So just take a look at everything that you're putting in, like small little things also, like, do you really need that tablespoon of sugar in your coffee? Can you substitute it maybe with some manuka honey? If you
Okay.
do want to have something sweet. Yogurt, just buy plain Greek yogurt. Don't buy the yogurt that has the fruit mix in, because that's full of sugar. Put in fresh fruit on your own, and I'm not saying that this takes a lot of time either. Just buy some punnets and put it
Mhm.
in. So these little things can make a big difference.
In terms of coffee, uh, it's so, I mean, it's always been part of the mainstream staple of adult Americans,
Mhm.
unless you were a child that had no rules.
Yeah,
But I mean, coffee has been part of the anti-inflammatory diet as Nixit.
it can be. Yeah,
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 yeah.
definitely. There are a lot of coffee alternatives also. Like there are a lot of teas that kind of like mimic coffee as well, like Cafe d'Orzo, which is an Italian thing. I think there's some other like teas that mimic coffee. I have no problem with coffee and a little bit of caffeine. I never noticed that it was linked to flare-ups or anything that I had, but I would only have one cup, like just not like a grande, you know what I mean? Just like
Right.
one cup, so it's always in balance, and everybody's body is different. We saw that very much with the COVID-19 pandemic. Some people have no symptoms at all, and some people are practically,
Yeah.
paralyzed by it or died. So everybody's is reacting differently. So pay attention to your own body. A lot of this has to do with the way that we digest also, your gut biome. Me being Asian and you being a different ancestries, like what I can digest without my insulin levels spiking up is very different, because like I'm Asian, I can eat rice all the way, like every day, any day, but like bread doesn't really sit too well with me, or pasta. My ex-boyfriend, like he was Irish, he could eat white potatoes and bread every day, you know what I mean? So, and his insulin levels wouldn't do anything. So pay attention to what works for your body and what you can digest well. And, I don't think that it's across the board that, this is good and this is bad. Like, I think certain people can tolerate some things better than others.
Yes.
But sugar, I think across the board is not good for you, and particularly processed sugar. Um, so there's certain rules that I think that you can follow. Processed foods in general also, like our body doesn't know how to digest all of these chemicals. So generally, if you look at the ingredients and you have no idea what they are, or how to pronounce them, better to stay away from it.
Yeah. And it's so many people think that eating clean is hard because it requires prep ahead of time. You need to go to the grocery store or use a food service and pick the foods ahead of time so you have them, because it's so easy to do the processed food diet of just grabbing something along the way versus, like you said, having the Greek plain yogurt and having the fresh fruit at your house. Because I know when I have those things accessible, I prefer to use that anyway.
Mhm.
And also going back about figuring out what your body responds to. What do you think about food journals as you start your
Oh, I
beginning?
think I think that they're great. Food journals, not only does it make you think twice about what you put in your mouth, but it gives you a clear thought process, because you think about what you're doing. Because usually we just eat blindly. You just eat and you feel funny later, but you don't associate the two together. So I think food journals are absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, that's something that every doctor has mentioned, that that is something
Definitely.
to do
And
for
I
sure.
Yeah, and I feel a lot of us, we are out of touch with the way that our bodies react, and we're out of touch of what exactly is a symptom, like and we kind of just try to power through pain or power through a cough or any type of symptom. If it doesn't bother us too much, like it's just like, oh, it'll go away. But
Mm.
actually our body is trying to tell us something, so we have to think of it as every type of symptom as a message from our body saying, hey, I didn't like this that much. You know what I mean? It's as if I mean, you have to think of your body as your house, and it really is. It's the only place that you have to live, you know? And so in your home, would you ignore a leak? Would you ignore a, a light bulb that goes out? Would you ignore a squeaky door or a leaking faucet? Anything like a broken window, a
Mhm.
cracked something, you wouldn't, so these are all things that you can kind of like use as analogy for your body, like, am I breaking out? Do I have rash? Do I have sore knuckles? Do I have gas? Am I bloated? Do I feel nauseous? All of these things. Are my nails brittle? Like all these things are your body giving you a message that something isn't quite right.
No,
Yeah.
that's an excellent, I've never heard it said that way before. And I think that will resonate with a lot of people because the body is our greatest indicator of what's going on. So it's connecting your brain and your body and seeing it as a sign to maybe go get, a doctor to check some things out.
Oh, definitely. And I really suggest that that because so much is linked to your gut biome, if your gut biome is healthy, like like it boosts your immunity, everything is linked to your gut biome. Just go for like blood tests and do a stool test and just make sure that you're digesting everything properly, you don't have leaky gut or anything, and that just kind of start from like a ground zero, that that okay, so from here on going forward, I know that my gut biome and my flora, my fauna and everything down there is good. Because I ended up being diagnosed as with SIBO not
Uh,
that long ago, which is small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. And so I just thought it was bloated. I had no idea that actually, because I had a bout of food poisoning, and the food poisoning can cause like an imbalance in your gut, and it just took forever to get
mhm.
back on track. And you know it's just a good thing every now and then to just have your gut checked out entirely.
Yeah, if your gut's telling you check your gut, check it.
Definitely,
But also
definitely.
with endometriosis too, there's a high correlation of SIBO. And many people
Oh,
that have come on
yeah.
here have said that they haven't, and Dr. Sechkin has always laughed off that anyone is with endo is told they have IBS. He said is BS.
Yeah.
To not believe that, to go deeper, to look into it, because usually if there's something going on, that it's not just, oh, it's IBS, deal with it, let it go. Like you said, go address the problem. If there's a leak, you're going to go fix it. So don't just let that go. For
Awesome.
for you've gone through so much over so much time, but now having a diagnosis later, like myself, later in life, what would be one takeaway that you would like to pass on to those that have endometriosis from your journey? What you
Um, yeah, I would say deal with it sooner opposed to later, because it's just growing inside you and it just gets worse and worse. I ended up having an 8-hour surgery,
oh,
and I was in the hospital for like 4 nights, so mine was a very extreme case, but if I had dealt with mine 5 years earlier, I probably wouldn't have had to have such a serious surgery. So deal with it sooner opposed to later. It's easier to fix the smaller it is, the smaller the problem. I would get a full body checkout, and most regular doctors may not do this. You might have to try to find a functional medical doctor or integrative medical doctor who, will look at all your blood work, look at all your urine work, look at do a stool test and just like check everything to make sure that everything else is working. Check your insulin levels, check your gut biome, check your hormonal levels, like everything. And just make sure that there's no other underlying causes that are contributing or making your endometriosis worse, I would say as well. And remind yourself that living in pain is not normal, so I think that so much of this of with and so many of us with endometriosis go through gaslighting, like, oh, it's fine, like, oh, you should just deal with it. It is not normal to bleed through a pad, a tampon, and your jeans into a restaurant chair. Like that is not normal. Okay.
no.
Like being like, I remember like walking down the street and having a cramp, and I just have to stop because like it was so painful, and like hang on to like a street lamppost or something, because I was like my cramps would sometimes bring tears to my eyes. I was like, this is not normal, becoming anemic from your periods, that's not necessarily normal either. So deal with it quickly, and do your research and find some good doctors. And I do think that it's important to attack it from both sides. So both from the medical side as well as from the functional medical side. Like you do need real medicine, but I think food is medicine too. So maybe supplements, what you're eating, diet, figure it all out. Yeah.
No, that's excellent advice, and I appreciate all your time today. We're excited to be having this episode in honor of the Patient Day conference that's upcoming, and in honor of March Endo Awareness Month. So it is lovely to have you, and fantastic insights. Really, I
Thank
love this
you.
food connection because there is so much to it.
Definitely. And good luck, everybody out there. Thank you for listening. And we are all endo warriors, and you will get through it because it's completely manageable disease. And I've not had a flare up since my surgery. So, and I've not had any complications. So you're in good hands with your doctors. And it's better to have to go through a surgery than to live in pain for the rest of your life.